What if I told you your favorite storm chasing live streamers, the chasers you see on channels like Ryan Hall and Max Velocity, would be a thing of the past in just a few short years? Sounds outlandish, probably wouldn't happen, but I have at least a little bit of reason to fear that could be a possibility. And we're going to go over that in this video. And it all stems from a law being passed in a state that is known better than any other for storm chasing. Of course, that's Oklahoma. The backdrop for Twister and Twisters, countless documentaries. You know, it is, in most people's opinion, the heart of Tornado Alley. And it's responsible, I think, for a lot of tourism in the state, too. But that hasn't stopped a couple representatives in the state from introducing a bill to require a license for storm chasing. And specifically, this is Senate Bill 158, otherwise known as the Oklahoma Emergency Weather Response and Tracking Regulatory Act of 2025. It's 8 pages long. I'm not going to just read the whole thing to you, but I'm going to cover some of the highlights and maybe end with a little conspiracy as to why I think this is even being looked at. And just for the record, Senator Mark Mann, Democrat, and Representative Scott Fettgatter, a Republican, are the co-authors of this bill, which actually is being read in its first committee tomorrow, February 4th. So the main points of this bill is to establish a license for professional storm trackers. And that is going to be a pretty narrow definition. So a professional storm tracker under this bill would be someone that is employed or contracted by a FCC regulated television station or a research institution under the Oklahoma regions. And those colleges and universities have to have courses offered in meteorology. So it's a pretty narrow definition of who could be a professional storm tracker under this law. And it gets better. So, besides all the regulatory requirements, if you're in the media persuasion, if you're working for a TV station, you have to get a letter from the chief meteorologist, essentially saying that you're fit to carry out the duties of said storm tracker. And that part's going to be important here as to what this bill is offering for these storm trackers in exchange for their initial fee of $500 and $250 each year after that, presumably paid, by the TV stations. So, what does this bill provide for said storm trackers, the professional kind? It allows use of emergency lights. So, for example, you could say, Mike Morgan at K4, chief meteorologist, is like, you're going to be our storm trackers. Here's your license. Go out and throw some cherries on top of the vehicle. Just make sure you're displaying that you have your license. You've passed your background checks, yada, yada. You're fit to go. Well, there's no language in the bill saying they have to be through any kind of law enforcement or EMS training, even have to be, a skilled driver taking any kind of driving courses. It's just basically up to the whims of the chief meteorologist. Sounds like a highly qualified individual to make that decision, if you ask me. The other piece of this bill that would benefit those storm trackers is they would get same access as any other emergency personnel to closed roads and highways. And the authors of this bill have pointed out that people are depending on these live streamers and these reporters, these storm chasers, to get the information and provide public safety. So they should be able to just breeze through and chase unfettered. So what that means for maybe other storm chasers, maybe the amateur or non-affiliated type, is you would have to pull over for these individuals when they have their lights on. They're treated just like law enforcement, fire, ambulance, so forth. They, in theory, could decide, hey, we're blocking this road. Nothing to stop that. And you can see where this becomes a dangerous effect for everyone on the road, not just storm chasers, but just everyday people having to pull over for these vehicles. And it's almost like they're being given a license to be as fast and reckless as they need to be to keep up with the storms. That is really what is being given permission here. And I totally agree that having real life, real time footage causes people to act and benefits public safety. But it's something that's been working for decades now. And I don't see how this bill can dramatically improve that, especially if these individuals are skilled chasers and these TV stations have more than just one or two on their team. They should be able to establish themselves in a way that can report on this information. This bill is basically giving emergency status to certain class of storm chasers, and it's creating two classes of storm chasers, those with a license and those without. So let's get into the nitty gritty. Besides that, what I just said, why is this a bad idea? Let's just get the research piece out of the way. So if this is only permitted for, say, the University of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, just in simplistic terms, what about the Doppler on wheels, the Dow that everyone knows and loves? You know, the big blue truck with the white radar dish on the back. They're currently based out of the University of Illinois. Are they not allowed access? Are they not allowed the same treatment as researchers in the University of Oklahoma? Doesn't seem like good science, in my opinion. What if this expands? Let's say it's passed. What if next year they add to the language and it becomes even more restrictive towards the non professional storm trackers, the ones that aren't affiliated with TV stations? What if you just can't chase at all? You know, what if it's up, and the verbiage says the enforcement of this is left up to local law enforcement. So let's say, you know, you're found in an area that was blocked off. Are you going to get a $500 fine? Are you going to get a ticket? Are you going to get arrested because you're a storm chaser? This seems like a very slippery slope. Not just in the state of Oklahoma, but we know that states of similar political makeup like to copy each other. You know, if this is passed in Oklahoma, what's to say Kansas, Texas, Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, South Dakota, they don't follow suit? You know, it just takes one representative with, you know, their shot at 5 minutes of fame to come in and say, hey, we're going to do this too, even though it's not needed. Oklahoma, I'll give you credit. It is a rat race. It's crowded. That's why I don't chase there anymore. I have no intentions of chasing there. This bill wouldn't hurt me directly, but there's that cascading effect. And let's say it passes in Oklahoma, and all the Oklahoma chasers, for which there are probably 1,000, a couple thousand, I don't know, they decide every big setup, since they can't chase in Oklahoma, they're going to go to Kansas. And Kansas is like, oh man, we can't handle this. We're going to pass the same bill. So then they go to Texas or Nebraska and they do the same. You know, then you start to give some just cause to these other states to follow suit. And with each one probably being a little more restrictive than the last. So that's my biggest fear. Me personally chasing largely in the northern part of Tornado Alley. But let's look at a few of the big picture items. And I'm going to pull in the First Amendment, freedom of the press. With this law, you are essentially creating two classes of essentially reporters. Call them storm chasers, storm trackers. myself and these other individuals, especially when doing live streams, are reporting on the weather to the public for hopefully the purposes of public safety and information. You know, if even if you're doing a documentary style that's going to be released later, you're still providing some information and education, either about an event or about the weather or about how to react, you know, list goes on and on. But you're restricting access for just the few. That is not freedom of the press. And we're not talking the olden days where you just had newspapers. We have TV, newspapers, but in this day and age, social media. And if you think about the viewership for Ryan Hall, Max Velocity, they are eating the Weather Channel's lunch. I have no doubt about it. It's at the top. Honestly, it's probably Ryan Hall, Max Velocity, and Fox Weather. I don't think the Weather Channel is even in the top 4 now. And that's nationally. Looking locally, we know TV stations are struggling. In fact, Media Allen Group, oddly enough, who owns the Weather Channel, earlier last month said they were going to nix 22 of their weather teams. That included here in Iowa, the good folks at KWWL, just gone. All the meteorologists gone. And in their place, they were going to try to do break-ins and weather forecast out of the Weather Channel in Atlanta, Georgia. Obviously, that didn't go over well, and they've gone back on their plans, and it sounds like they're going to keep their local meteorologist, at least for now. We know that was just an effort to cut costs. They tried to, I guess, corporatize local news, and it didn't work, which I am thankful for. We need our local meteorologist. Different story, different video. Point is, legacy media is suffering in part due to the success of YouTube streamers. And the likes of Reed Timmer, Freddie McKinney, Vince Valetti, Brandon Kopic, he kind of does his own thing, but also works for Fox Weather. He'd probably be one that would get a license under this new law. Reed Timmer, unless he gets hired again by K4, probably not. So keep that in mind. For Oklahoma, I would think if this dissuaded and outright prevented amateur storm chasing, it's going to have a big impact on your tourism dollars if you factor in all the gas that is purchased, the food, the hotels, thousands of storm chasers over a dozen events adds up to a good chunk of change, maybe offset a little bit by the fees that are collected by the state. Everyone loves a good fee. So, and lastly, storm chasing as a whole. I made a video almost exactly a year ago called Storm Chasing is Freedom. And that's because it is my belief there is hardly any other way to express your freedom in this country out in the public like you can with storm chasing. Most other hobbies and activities require a license, a fee, a permit, training, certification. There's some slight, however small, cost or barrier to entry. Not to make us look bad, but storm chasing is sort of the last cowboy type thing you can do west of the Mississippi. And with that comes responsibility, but there is freedom there. And I'd hate to see that disappear. Not just for myself, but anyone else. Even if you're just a weekender and you want to go out there and experience something very few people actually get to experience in person, I'd hate that to go away because of the whims of some state representatives who are probably, and this is where the conspiracy comes in, acting on behalf of a dying media group. this bill seems to only benefit those television stations and maybe the universities. I think they were just thrown in there. I think this is mostly there to benefit the television stations because of all of these live streaming storm chasers are taking away their viewers. And especially in Oklahoma, they have devoted so many resources and so much money to their severe weather coverage, and for good reason. It's very important to them. It's their bread and butter. Quite certain of it. I've never lived there, just from what I've read over the years and just observed. They have helicopters, lots of storm chasers, really decked out vehicles. It is their game. And there are new players, they don't like it, and this is a nice way to kind of bring the playing field back in their favor. And a man has been on camera saying that storm chasers have asked for this, and he doesn't understand why there's so much pushback now. And it's probably because the storm chasers that asked for it are the ones that are going to benefit the most. They're not the ones most of us are accustomed to and familiar with. Not to point them out, specifically, but, the most famous down in Oklahoma is probably Val and Amy Castor. And I think this is a way in which they regain that spotlight. They probably won't tell you that, but I'm pretty sure the folks that own the television stations are probably thinking that. So that's my interpretation. That's my conspiracy. And it has some broader precedents by none other than the president. I actually learned today that at the White House, in their press briefing room, they're going to open up seating for folks like vloggers, podcasters, YouTubers, just general content creators and influencers to ask questions alongside the major networks and Fox and MSNBC, CNN, all those folks. So there are a lot of shifts happening in the world, and in the small corner of storm chasing, I think that's where this bill in Oklahoma fits in. So sorry for what is probably a long video. Thanks for hanging in there if you've made it this far. I just wanted to bring this to your attention. I'll leave some links down below directly to the bill so you can read it yourself. And I'd also encourage you to check out the committee members. And if you live in Oklahoma, maybe send them an email and say, hey, I'm either for or against this, and here's why. And yeah, I hope it doesn't pass. That's my opinion and the opinion of many a storm chaser that I've read on social media. And I sure as hell hope it doesn't spread to any other state. So thanks for watching, and until the next video, chase on, my friends.